What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money investing in fractional real estate online. If you've been watching my channel for a while, I think it's no secret that on average, I like the deals that Mogul puts out, significantly more than the average deal, at least the average new deal on Lofty, right? When they're both brought out at their initial price, um, I invest in about two-thirds of the properties Mogul puts out, and virtually none, probably four or five out of 150 or 175 on Lofty. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what I think is happening there. I think there's a big difference in how each company executes and how their customer service looks like and that sort of thing. But I think there's a deeper problem that's causing the issues for Lofty that might, the more I think about it, the more I think it's somewhat solvable, or at least there are some things that can be done to improve the situation. Um, but the big difference between the two platforms is the level of decentralization, right? On Mogul, you have, like, if you click on every single deal, you've got one person who, underwrote and listed the property on here. Um, this person has a ton of experience and knowledge in real estate. Their job is to all day, every day, find us deals, make sure those deals are running right. That there's somebody with knowledge and experience in charge and with enough skin in the game to want a good outcome, right? I mean, he's one of the founders of the company, and I think obviously he's not alone, but there's really a group or a team of people doing this, right? Where on Lofty, it's a marketplace. So they're saying, no, we're completely decentralized. Anybody can list whatever they want on the platform, which is why on average you're just not getting great deals on there. But it's also why it becomes incredibly difficult the deals that are okay become incredibly difficult to manage um, because there's nobody that's actually in charge, right? I mean, you might have a property manager, but on a day-to-day basis, there's really nobody calling the shots if the property manager says, "What are we doing?" And so, you hear people talking about free riders a lot in the Discord. There's even a song that gets posted quite a bit about it. And I think, the free riders are the issue, but the bigger problem is, and they're very related, but it's a collective action problem, right? And so I know I've mentioned this quite a few times. I've used this phrase, and I think that one, sometimes I just assume people know stuff that they don't know, or that it's not, it doesn't have the same meaning to them as that it does to me. This is something that's covered a lot in economics classes and whatnot. And, you go through like the prisoner's dilemma and all these different, social situations about cooperation. A lot of the negotiations class actually talk about this as well. Um, but in general, the collective action problem is like when there's a group that would benefit from everybody doing something, um, but the individuals don't have the right incentive to make sure that that happens. And so this is something that we see over and over again in the DAOs. So, like, you'll have someone come jump into the Discord and say, "Hey, I think we should sue the past property manager." And people agree, right? They're like, yes, we should. And they say, okay, great. Somebody find an attorney, and nobody does, right? And what's going on there? Well, there's no individual that owns enough of those DAOs for it to be worth their time to spend to go and figure that out, right? To figure that issue out, to call attorneys, to hire somebody maybe, although you can't hire someone, you shouldn't hire someone yourself, right? Like you should have the DAO do it, probably if the DAO is going to sue. Um, but so you have this situation where it would be good if people worked together and contributed, but you don't have there's not the right incentives, right? Like so, I'm going to give you this example of Odom, right? This is a property. I actually own a decent amount of this. It is trading for what I think is way below what it should be. That reminds me, please like and subscribe. In the description to this video, I have links to all the sites where I'm currently invested in fractional real estate online. I still didn't add Arrived, but all the others. please do your own due diligence on those platforms and any properties you see me buy on there. I'm talking about this property, but that doesn't mean just because I think this is way underpriced at the moment doesn't mean that you should go out and buy it. You want to do your own due diligence. Um, and there's also a link to the Discord that I have set up to talk about any of the platforms. And it's been pretty active lately. It's a lot of new people joining, talking about a lot of different platforms. It's my goal is to just create a place where we can share ideas, share investment ideas, share ideas on how we can sort of pressure platforms to get better, all these different things. And so please feel free to join that. So back to this. So yeah, I think this is way underpriced, but the reason is it is a property that has really suffered from this collective action problem, right? In a couple of different ways. One, so it's a large property. It's like I think it's 5 bedrooms. Yeah, 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. It was a long-term rental. It was making just terrible returns. It's a, whoever when they originally bought it, they definitely spent way too much on this, right? It was never worth the dollars that it was, that went into it. I don't believe. Um, they changed it to a midterm rental, and that wasn't really going well. And then there's been votes to sell it, and it is currently listed, but in every step of the way, so there hadn't really been anybody running the show. We have recently hired Earl to do it. He will get paid a little something if he gets it done. Honestly, we're probably not, it's probably still not worth the time he's spending on it, even though he's, but relative to maybe some of the other DAOs, it makes sense. But it is, so we have that, so it's getting a little bit better, but it's not a situation where he has enough. So, okay, let me explain what I think should be done with this property. If I owned this outright, I would turn it into a pad split. It is large enough that you should be able to have between 8 and 10 bedrooms in it. And in that market with it's the only solution that I could come up with running numbers on a bunch of different scenarios where it really makes a lot of sense. But to do that, we'd have to probably raise between $50,000 and $80,000 in capital. Maybe not quite so much, but we'd have to raise a significant amount of capital, reconfigure the property, clean it up, make sure that we have proper reserves, to move forward because that's a process that takes a while. Then we'd have to hire Pad Split or whoever it is, and also a management company. Pad Split does not do full service management. You still need someone that does the day-to-day operations as far as repairs, and certain interactions with the tenants when you're like moving them in and out. Um, and so it is there's if it were mine, if I owned it outright, it would make perfect sense for me to go ahead and put the additional capital in, work through those issues. But where, even though I'm one of the largest owners in this property, I only own like 3% or 3.5% of it or something. I mean, it's not a significant percentage. I think the person that owns the most of this might be right around 15%. As far as I know, that's not someone who's very active in the Discord about it either. And so, and even, for 15%, it wouldn't be worth the time for that person to take charge and do it. I don't think, in my mind. Um, so that's one of the big issues. And then the other real problem we have is, and it's very closely tied to collective action problems, is coordination costs. And so you can tell, I just wanted some structure around the way I talked about this. So I, just threw some stuff in here and I'm using the AI overview. I think it's kind of funny, but it did a good job on this, right? And so like, our coordination costs are, how difficult is it for us all to talk about things, communicate, make decisions together? Um, and I mean, this has just been a mess, right? I mean, we have the Discord. There's probably like 7 or 8 active people in the Discord, and there's I don't remember how many investors there are on this, but there are just tons of them. Um, and so there's one of the things people keep asking about is, okay, when are we going to have this governance 2.0 that Lofty talked about? I think they originally were going to roll it out in like 2023 or something. And they've since said like, well, we're rolling it out in little bits at a time. And so they're adding ways, but we really have no reasonable way to talk to all the other parties, We have no way of sort of streamlining decision making. And I think that if you want to get to a point where we can actually run these things in a decentralized manner, there has to be, and this is where I'm getting at. I think that we really have to have some sort of way, an improved manner of coordinating, or a standardized way, or a best practice type of way to centralize decision making, in maybe a couple of people, but in a small enough group that, so like one of the things that we've had, okay, we're not going forward with the plan that I just mentioned. I haven't even been pushing towards it because I think it would be a ridiculous undertaking in the Dow. Like, I think it's too big of a construction project, and there's too many ways that we could screw it up. And we've just really shown that we're good at screwing things up when we do it within the Dow. So, for example, right now it's listed for sale. Um, we've had some offers, but like the process of even just getting back and forth and discussing the offer, and making a counter, it's just too clunky still, right? And I know I talked about this the other day, more specifically with selling properties and how that becomes a problem. But I think this is a broader issue, right? It is, if we can't, so like, I think one of the things that I think would make a lot of sense is if you could start to delegate your votes, right? So if we could figure out, okay, so like in this one, we've given Earl some authority, but not really. He can't really negotiate and make a deal, right? On the ones, so on Bowmanville, we did give him, like, he could actually make a deal. And guess what? That deal is already, that we already have a buyer lined up, and honestly, for more money than I thought we'd get on it. And because he was completely unfettered ability to negotiate. We just said, you just can't do any self-dealing. You can't enrich yourself in this process. Take the property and run with it. And he's a experienced person. He's good with negotiating, and understood what value we had and what we should expect. I was able to get that done. On this one, he's doing some coordination, but we haven't given him the ability to actually negotiate. And so we get a deal. Um, he shares it with us in the Discord. There's a bunch of discussion about it. It gets sent out to vote. We, with maybe just one counter proposal, what we came up with in the Discord. But like I mentioned earlier, that Discord is not, the vast majority of owners are not in there. And so they're not getting any information until they see a vote. And that might be 24 hours or more after we actually got the offer. Um, the way the votes are set up currently, they can't send in a counter proposal that changes the vote, right? They can just send in something that Lofty's calling a counter proposal, but it's not really a counter. It's just, we're just saying, hey, don't do this, and then we'll try something else after this vote happens. And so, by the very nature of that, we end up losing a day or 2 days or 3 days, depending on how much time is allotted for each vote. And so I think there's a couple ways. One would be creating a system where you actually are blasting this info out to every owner right away, and then the voting happens very quickly, right? You get 2 hours to vote on stuff like this because it is, uh, the more time should be all the information should get out to all the owners. There should be some method of doing that without having to do a proposal. At the moment, I don't think that we have a way that I can just send a message to all the co-owners in a property, without it being a proposal. Um, which is kind of silly. I mean, I guess the property manager can send an update, like, or maybe Lofty could send an update and say, "Hey, we have this." I guess they do that sometimes. They'll say, "Hey, we have this offer," but almost always that comes with, "Hey, we have this offer. Do you want to accept it or deny it or whatever?" It would make a whole lot of sense if it said, "Hey, we have this offer. Let's hear some, how would you like to react to it, right?" And then have have a certain time period where people could craft a proposal, and then that goes in together, and then you vote on those proposals, right? I mean, so I think that there's a way, um but even in that, you still have the collective action problem we talked about earlier, right? I might be able to spend 5 or 10 hours on this deal. Really, like I mean, I've done, I've spent more time on it than I should at this point, mostly because I am really just experimenting with the platform and with all the other platforms and trying to figure out, how they work. Can I make money on them? But for the amount of money I have invested in this deal, I've definitely spent way too much time thinking about it, talking to co-owners about it, working on stuff. And you could say, oh, well, you could just buy more. At this price, I mean, I could. Um, but while, when I was really accumulating in here, I was moving the price up more than I wanted to anyway. And yeah, I could probably buy another if I wanted to put the amount that it would make it worthwhile to do it, I'd end up pushing the price up past the point where it would make sense. Um, and so but I think that if I did spend the time on it, there is a plan that would work for it moving forward. Like I said, I mean, but my rough numbers for 8 to 10 unit pad split makes it look really great. But have to go there, get some floor plans, figure out how do you configure it, what's it really cost to do that. And there's a lot of time that goes into that. And there's not the incentive for me to do that with the amount that I have into the deal. And I think that there's probably even the person that has 15% into it, I don't think there's the proper incentive for that person to do it, assuming it's somebody that is educated in this aspect of real estate investing and would even be able to go there and understand and make those plans to do it. I mean, I don't, a lot of people get here as a passive investor, right? And so um, and I think that's why I think over and over again I think that Mogul is the superior platform. If your goal is to just you know buy their average deal is just a good deal, you do some due diligence, you make sure that's a deal that you like. You don't make from that point forward, you only weigh in on the real big decisions. Are we going to refinance this? Are we going to sell it? Otherwise, you're letting somebody with deep knowledge in this space take care of it. Um, I think that makes perfect sense. I think so yeah, a couple so obviously, that communication piece could be improved and it would be a way to make Lofty really work for these proposals and voting. Like, but you'd have to have it be um, what I think maybe in tandem with that, you have a delegation of voting rights, right? Where um, where I pick somebody, like for example, I just think, okay, Earl's running this at the moment. I'm just going to hand all my voting rights over to Earl. And, if enough people do that, then he actually just has the right to make decisions. He puts it together, he puts out the vote, but he knows it's going to pass. I think that that solves a lot of the problem of the speed of things, right? And letting one person really take the action and decide. And so that helps us a lot in those scenarios, like the purchase and sale, where you just need those quick responses. But that doesn't solve, and so it doesn't solve the um, whether it's really worth his time to spend the time digging into it, figuring out what's the best move and that sort of thing. Um, I guess we've sort of started to work on that by, in some of our votes, voting to give whoever's doing that some money to do it. It's not a great alignment of interests, I guess, but it's not terrible. Um, I guess it is the problem with it is it's just paying them to get a deal done, not really say, well, how good of a deal is it? And so then it's going to be somebody that we trust to do the right thing. Um, so yeah, and even in that, right? I think that makes sense to do to delegate that to somebody when we're talking about something as simple as a sale, even though that's proven to be a difficult situation. If we were trying to change a business model like this, and I mean, we did it once already, right? We changed it to midterm rental. They hired a. This was before I was invested in this, but they hired a management company to help with that and whatnot. But it certainly, uh, didn't go very well. So I guess there's that. Um, Absent that, another, so either, you make it much easier for this 100-person group to discuss, and you make it easier for them to vote by having some consolidation with by delegating my votes to somebody else. But another option that you could have is where you just limit the number of investors in each deal. Uh, you know, buying real estate for $50 sounds fantastic until most people only have $50 involved in any deal, and then okay, or 500 or a small enough amount that it doesn't they're not going to spend enough time on it to make a good decision, right? And I mean that's what we just are seeing that over and over again with DAOs. I mean this is one that I think is a good example, although we do have some active discussion. There's several of us that are in here trying to move something forward, but it really is like every time I really start to work on a plan for this, I just get to the point where I'm like, we should just sell it. And it's not a great price. The price that we're getting, well, it's actually, we're doing owner financing. The price is actually not bad. The terms are not great on the most recent offer. It looks like maybe we'll get another one. So I don't know. We're muddling through on this one, but if this had been a property that I owned outright, and last fall or last winter I decided to sell it, which is when we first started talking about that, this property would have been listed and probably sold 6 months ago. Um, but because there's all these little steps involved, because we have it's really difficult to coordinate, and we have nobody's really incentivized to just jump in and do things. Um, it's a problem. So I think it would be interesting to explore having DAOs that have a very limited number of members, right? Like, okay, what if only 10 people could own each one? And you still, with 10, you could still have it so that nobody's a decision maker. Um, I don't know how that works if people are trying to, I guess what you'd have to do is make it so that a token's not $50, right? A token's $1,000 or a token's $5,000 or whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't have to be 5,000, but it would have to be some larger number, especially on the ones that have some, debt involved. It doesn't, this is one where it's just owned all cash. And so you have almost 12,000 tokens. Um, that's absurd, right? But if it is, I mean, like even if you had $1,000 tokens, that would make it, you could still have 613. So you'd have to have a bigger number. I don't know. It's something I've been thinking about a lot because Lofty's obviously broken. Like the system, it's destroyed so much more value. It's not creating value, right? Like if you look at one of the things that I thought was interesting, somebody pulled, okay, how many properties that have been launched for at least 1 year are over $50 or are over, I don't even think it was over $50 or, are high enough that it overcomes the fees. Was it that or over? Yeah, high enough that it overcomes the fees. There's only like 4 or 5 properties. It's absurd, right? It's an absurdly low number of properties to be doing well. And so it's really obvious that the current structure doesn't work. Um, and these little sort of marginal changes, I'm just not sure are going to get there. And so, yeah, I think that if, this is one of the reasons people like keep clamoring for, hey, when are we going to get governance 2.0 or whatever you want to call it, where, um, where there's a better system to talk to all the co-owners. Um, I guess really what I wanted to talk about today is that I don't know that even if we could all, so that's basically what it's doing is it's taking out the communication cost, right? Not really this negotiating, discussing conflict resolution stuff. So by having this system, presumably we're really only, this is all we're doing, right? We're just making it easier to communicate. You still have these other issues. And then also too, we still have all the regular collective action issues, the free riding, just the struggling with coordination, and the fact that this is what they talk about, the tragedy of the commons, how it relates to it, right? Is that, uh, you know, the we just all want to, well, I'm not even gonna, I'm gonna explain that backwards, but so we're just basically not contributing. We're all just trying to take from the fact that it's uh, somebody else's work is, yes, I guess that maybe is not really. Wonder how they're throwing that in there. But anyway, you still run into all of those issues where even with because of the really decentralized nature, I don't know that, improving the communication really helps. I do think if you improve the communication and you allow for, delegation of votes, then that gets you a lot further along, right? Because then you have people, maybe people that are more engaged, that have a bigger sway on things. But it still doesn't really work with their incentives lining up, right? Like they don't own a big enough piece of that deal to necessarily make sense. And so yeah, I mean, it's why I spend a lot of time thinking about, like, are there other ways that it could be fixed, right? And I think about it in, okay, can this platform be fixed? And also, though, a lot of people talk to me about, hey, I think I'm going to create, some sort of competitor to Lofty. And most of those people, I think, are just talking. I don't think there's been a few that I think might really, take a shot at it, but I think most of them are just frustrated and know that this system doesn't work, but want something like this where their input is involved, right? It is, and that's what's kind of interesting to me. So if you've been watching my channel for a while and you're investing in fractional real estate, when you got into it originally, when you thought about investing in real estate online, did you think it was just going to be purely passive? You were just going to pick a deal, put your money in, and forget about it? Or were you hoping to be able to affect the outcome of those properties? So I would say from the most of the people that I've talked to, it's the former, right? They really just thought, hey, I'm going to pick a property, I'm going to put money in, and it's going to be like, what you get on Mogul or what you get on Arrived, although hopefully with better returns than what their stated returns look like, or what you get on a lot of different platforms where it's really just, I'm just trying to put my money in there. It's basically a passive investment. I understand that Lofty cannot do it that way because of their, from their regulatory, their approach to the regulatory issues is that, this isn't a security because everybody works in it, right? Like we're not benefiting of the action or the work of others. It's our own work. We're all voting. We're all making decisions. But so maybe for that to work, there has to be some restriction on the number of people, or I mean, there's just something has to really change. And I don't think, and now we have a bunch of managers. You have Earl and Alec and Josh that have taken over I've got a mosquito flying around that are taking over a bunch of managing a bunch of the properties, but it doesn't really solve the problem, right? I mean, although some of them are investors in the properties as well, it's still, there's one, they're spread very thin, most of them at this point in time. But there's also, they still don't have the same incentive as if I owned that property outright myself. And without that, it's just hard for me to want to put that work in for 30 or 40 properties. Honestly, I don't know that it's really possible to do it, for that many properties. And I think part of the problem is they're all distressed properties right now, right? Maybe if if you had taken them one at a time and fixed one and then moved to the next, it would look a lot different. But there was some timing pressure. I'm not sure, but I think even when things are working, when things get sort of evened out, it still seems to me that there's never going to be the one person that really is knowledgeable enough about the property and um, has enough skin in the game that they care enough to, that it's worth their time to put the work in necessary to come up with a plan that really works for whatever it is. And sometimes it might be a capital improvement project. I mean, it doesn't have to be something as much as Odom where it's like, I really think the only way this makes sense is if we do, we either just sell it with owner financing, which is the strategy right now, or do some like major repositioning. But every property, if we hold it long enough, will have to go through something, right? You'll have to sell it in the future. You have to go through a big capital project. You might have to deal with an eviction, although that's been pretty well handled by by third party management because that's really what they're set up for. But then sometimes getting that property ready to go again has just been a real problem because the speed of it. Every day or every week that you're vacant is like 2% vacancy, right? Is that right? Yeah. So if the voting process, a, on average, to from start to finish when you evict somebody to get the new tenant in, if it just adds 1 week in the overall time, that's like adding 2% vacancy across your entire portfolio. In my experience so far with the way things work on Lofty, that voting, from the time that you first go to start to evict someone till the time that you have a new tenant in there, all of the frictional costs of voting to do each step is really adding, I would guess, at least a couple of weeks and sometimes significantly more, especially like, so for example, I can't think of which property it is. I think it might be Green. I'm not sure. I don't know which property it is. But they are, the property's trashed. They need to fix it up. They voted to do a capital call, and now we're waiting on Lofty to actually, do the mechanics of the capital call for them so they can raise that money. Where again, I mean, if this is my property, I'm writing a check, I'm getting it done. And then, if some sort of financing has to happen, I figure that out. But it is by adding 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I mean, every week, like, again, you're just adding 2% vacancy, 2% vacancy. And that really adds up very quickly to the point where I think it's killing these deals. I mean, some of these deals, some of them end up vacant for like 6 months at a time. And it's something where, okay, if I had a property, I had it listed with a property manager, a week goes by and we don't get a lot of leads, I'm going to be on the phone with that property manager, figure out what's going on. I'm probably going to want to walk through the property if I'm local to it. We're going to figure out, do we need to lower the price? Is there something wrong with the property that we're not seeing in the pictures? Um, but that doesn't happen, right? Like, basically everybody just waits around. Again, that's a collective action problem. Like there's nobody, or and sort of free riding, right? Everybody just thinks, oh, somebody else will do it, which is the sort of bystander effect, right? All these things kind of play together. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's so it just doesn't seem like a workable system the way that it is, and it's hard to imagine that a little bit of an improvement in the way we communicate is really going to get us to a point where we're taking the actions that we need to. So I think, sum it up and then I'll be done. I think, one, you need that, right? We need the way that we're communicating with all the owners quickly. It's not me sending an email to Lofty and asking them to send an email to everybody when they have time to do it, and maybe only Tuesdays, right? I mean, it's a ridiculous process. So I own this property with 100 other people, and I can't talk to those people. So one, creating that communication, bridge so that happens. Two, delegating votes, right? Making it so that uh, there's fewer people that have to make the decision, so the decision can be made quicker. Um, I mean, I guess people can just abstain too. I don't know. I think I'd much rather have the ability to say, okay, this is somebody I trust, whatever, make my vote, just copy their vote, would be a much better system than um, me just not voting, and then whoever did decide to vote, that works it out. And then I really think some thought should be put into, does it make sense to limit the number of members in a DAO? Because I don't know that there's some level of technology that is going to overcome the fact that we're herding cats on a daily basis, that we've got just all these different groups and they all, when we have a discussion in the Discord and there's 35 different ideas for a property, that's a exaggeration. But sometimes, I mean, there's a lot of different ways, everybody has a little bit of a different way to think about it. And one of the things is, if you had limited membership DAOs, you could then also start to do some sorting, amongst ourselves, where uh, I'm investing in the DAOs that have most of the other people are people that I share a similar worldview with as far as how we're going to operate the properties. Is this a long-term investment? Is it not? Are we flipping the property? Do we want to keep our money in Bitcoin? Like, I mean, all these things come up, right? And they end up kind of filtering through a bunch of the different DAOs. Um, and I just don't know that it works. I mean, I don't know. I have had a lot of discussions with lots of you lately who are very frustrated with the platform. And lots of people trying to figure out different solutions and ideas. I mean, this is one that really gets me, right? Because this is a nice property. It's one that I honestly believe, that with the right business plan, it could do perfectly fine. But, buying it at $25, or like my average price is just under 30, I think it makes a lot of sense there. I don't think for anybody it makes sense for the people that have spent $50 on it. But that's one of the problems that we have is there are still a lot of people anchored on that $50 price point. And that's it's just not going to get there. Okay, I've talked way too long, breaking out the giant water bottle, spilling it on myself. Um, but yeah, that's my only other thought. I am curious if people have different ideas on ways that we could make this work better. Um, because I don't. I mean, that's sort of all I've come up with so far. And I mean, two of the three are just sort of um, technology things. The third one is just a business thing, right? Like, I mean, it's just you could easily implement it going forward. You have to figure out what number makes sense, right? People's average investment would have to go up. And then if I'm starting to do that, then it's like, well, does that make sense for me to do that versus just buy my own deals? Maybe if it's still like 10 people, so I'm just doing a tenth of a deal at a time. I'm getting much less diversification that way. Um, then you'd end up having like little cartels form, right? You'd have groups of people that would go and take over these, and it'd be a lot easier to do it. And I think that might actually be a good thing, right? I think it'd be, if I had three or four people, we all thought the same way. We identified DAOs, took them over, and I mean, you can kind of do that now, but no matter what you do, that you're going to have this issue of uh, a whole bunch of people in there. I mean, maybe we could do it. I guess if you did it on launch, right? And it was like, okay, there's a whole bunch of us. We identify this is one. This is what we want to do with it. Let's just get into it. But at the moment, the average launched property is pretty terrible. So, again, just my opinion. Do your own due diligence on those properties. Um, I guess if we did that though, then maybe those same groups would be easier for them to go out and identify, hey, this is what we like. Maybe even do some of the work to get those properties on the platform, like some people are already doing. Anyway, I guess that's way more than I was planning to talk today. Hopefully that it spurred some discussion. I'm sure we're going to get the Free Rider song posted at least once about this because I do like it though. So please keep that up. All the little songs in the Discord, I really enjoy that. Um, but also too, yeah, if you have other ideas, it is something that my whole goal, like I said, is to really move this industry forward, to have a whole bunch of us get together, talk about stuff, figure out, what could work better for us, and then yeah, pressure the platform to do it. And if, maybe Lofty can't figure it out, and maybe there's some other third party that's out there trying to put something together that we could really influence what that looks like going forward. Um, I mean, I'm saying maybe, I'm sure that's the case, right? There's a lot of people in this space thinking about this. Um, I don't think that there's any particular reason that you have to have, such cheap tokens and massive decentralization. I mean, I think you could have it so you had, it's still there's still no one person that's in charge, but it is, in far fewer hands. Each person has more skin in the game. Um, I don't know. But then, maybe a lot of the people that came to the platform uh, were attracted to the $50 token price, and so then that doesn't work, right? You don't have the right customers here for that, and I think that's possible. Although I've talked to a lot of you that have a significant amount of money, right, and that are putting sort of big chunks into some deals. So maybe there's something there. All right, now I've really talked way too long. So until next time, I would just keep having random thoughts about how we can improve this industry so that you don't have to. But I would like it if you thought about it too. Oh, do the thing with the bell. Did you do the bell thing? Thank you for the bell, poking it.